G'day and welcome to the Outer Side. I'm Tony, and in this episode I'm joined by Scotty Williams, better known to most as Scotty's Gone Walkabout. Welcome to the show, mate.
Yeah, mate. Thanks for having us.
So, where do we start with you? You're an outdoorsman, a content creator, a photographer.
Yep.
And I guess you've got quite a unique little niche in terms of YouTube, in terms of the content that you make. So,
yeah, especially in Australia.
Yeah, so how did it start? Like, did you grow up camping and being outdoors? Is that where it started for you?
Yeah, so Dad, pretty lucky that Dad was sort of like into the outdoors and stuff. Like, would take us surfing and hiking and camping. Actually, even in this national park here, this is like a little stomping ground. As all young attackers, he'd come out here and get us lost.
Yes.
And but no, it was good. And yeah, so having Dad sort of getting us outdoors and stuff from young age is really beneficial. I think that's like, stoked to have a father like that, I think. So I think some people don't have that kind of access to the outdoors from a young age. Yeah. So just sort of starting off, just been camping most of my life and surfing. Growing up, surfing was a big thing for me for a long time. And then as I sort of got more into my 20s, I tended to just sort of drift more into the bush and get into hiking and camping and things like that.
Yeah, right. That's pretty cool. And it's something that's not lost on me that so many of my guests on this show, when I ask them that question, it always starts when you're a kid, right?
Yeah,
like that exposure to the outdoors as a kid sets you up for a lifetime of it, right?
Yeah. I've got mates who dads didn't do stuff like that, and then they're just not that really sort of interested in the outdoors. And I think it's so important to raise your kids and get them outside.
Yeah, and just before we started filming, you mentioned that you've got a young boy yourself.
Yeah, I've got a 5-month-old son now, so I cannot wait. We've already been on a few camping trips now, but I'm just so stoked to get him out there as he gets a bit older and stuff, and teach him everything that I know and stuff. So
absolutely. And I'm the same, man. A young daughter, and like we had a camping on the weekend, and it's definitely challenging. But I think it's good. And I think the important thing is to like just reset your expectations in terms of like, no, everything will not go smoothly, and maybe you can't go as far or for as long, but you know, you can still start when they're young.
Just you don't have to do that much, like you say. Just nice little car camp, and as long as you're just getting outside and just like, and I think every time you do it, it gets easier and easier. I think Harry Fighter Fork has kind of instilled that in some of my thought, like how he's sort of got his little boy out there from a really young age, and like the more you do it, the easier and easier it gets. Because otherwise, I think some people can wait too long. And then before you know it, they're 5 years old, they haven't been camping with them, and then it's like, oh, what do we do?
It'll never be the perfect time, right? And we've had my daughter out a couple of times now, and like we hired a caravan the first time, just to like really ease into it. And it was more so for us than for her. Like she's 6 months old, she doesn't care. But on the weekend we did proper off-grid camping with her for the first time, and it was good. Like they're so adaptable, and I want it to be normal for them. Like
the thing is, like in the bush, like you don't really actually need to bring many toys and stuff like that. I feel like just the bush is just interesting enough for a little kid just to run around, like look at insects and
absolutely
and things like that, and it just keeps them more occupied than like compared to being at home. So
and I think for me, like the driving force is to make sure that the outdoors is the appealing part, not screens and iPads and all that sort of jazz. So you started doing that stuff obviously as a kid, and then how did the transition occur from you doing it with your family to then shooting content and making the sort of videos that you do now?
So I guess like during my 20s, I used to go camping a lot with like my mates and stuff, and then I guess as I got a bit older, I kind of wanted to, like that was just more sort of car camping kind of stuff, and then as I got a bit older, I wanted to, like I was watching things on YouTube, like a lot of American and Canadian guys to sort of go out on these like epic little canoe trips and just sort of like little bushcraft kind of wilderness trips, and that sort of like really just sparked like an interest to me when I was sort of probably like 27 or something like that, 28. Because before that, like you do your typical thing, like where you just go out and get on the piss every weekend with mates and just spend all your money at the pub and stuff. And it's fun when you're young and like in your early mid-20s, but after a while, you realise you're just like spending all your money, waking up hangover every Sunday. And I kind of got pretty sick of that after a while. So I started to just go out on my own little ventures, like particularly in the Royal National Park here, just like when work was quiet, I'd go out for a nice little bushwalk. And then as I started to do that and get interested, I was like, well, there's not really that many guys in Australia who sort of film this kind of content. Like, there's heaps of fishermen and four-wheel driving channels, but in terms of sort of like hiking or bushcrafty kind of videos, there wasn't really many people who did it. There's probably one guy, like Chris Behrman on the South Coast. He's sort of a bit more hiking, fishing kind of based.
Oh, yeah, with the little Jack Russell.
Yeah. But he's a lot more like fishing based, I guess. So I was kind of, like initially I was a lot more sort of trying to tap into that kind of hiking and sort of just like wild camping. I'm just going into a place where like it's not an established campground. You just hike into the middle of nowhere and you're just trying to find a spot to set up camp and bring a tarp along. And I found that like sort of, real big interest for me, and I started just to start making videos because there's no one else really doing it. And yeah, sure enough, a lot of people seem to enjoy it.
Yeah,
it's because there was no one else doing it in Australia really, so I sort of tapped into that little market, which did really well.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I've watched heaps of your stuff, so
cool.
No, it's really enjoyable and it's different. So you do almost all of your trips solo.
Yeah, pretty much. I've only like recently started to dabble with like sometimes bringing someone out. Like I've got this other guy who makes videos, Matsy, the silly swagman. So he'll come out on trips. Like we've got a trip next week down the Snowy River, doing a pack rafting trip. So he'll come on for that one. But generally it's like, pretty much solo, which I absolutely love. Like I'm a bit of an introvert myself, so like, I'm more than happy to get out in the bush and spend time by myself. And I love being out with mates, but I find there's just, I don't know, something special about being in like a pretty wild place by yourself where you've only got yourself to rely on. And I also just find like I don't know, just when you don't, not sort of trying to keep someone else like entertained, like I find you can just kind of do what you want and like you're not trying to keep someone else happy in a way. So it's, I love doing it by myself. It's good.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you're right. Like I've been on like big touring trips with big groups and it's always hard because like someone wants to do this and that person wants to do something different, and there's always like a bit of compromise. Whereas if you're by yourself, you can be a little bit more selfish and just do what you want to do.
And especially if you're filming as well. Like you don't, like when you're trying to film a video, there's so much like behind the scenes stuff, like setting up the camera, doing the walkway, and if you've got mates with you, they get sick of that pretty quickly.
Yeah, so, it can be pretty punishing, right?
Yeah.
Even a lot of the four-wheel drive content that I shoot for GME and like, various YouTube channels that we participate in, like people don't really understand how much input goes into it, right?
So much.
Like a track that I could go drive in 10 minutes by myself could take us a full day when you're filming.
Yeah, and so when I'm just trying to set up like my tent or just a tarp or something, I could set it up literally within like a minute or two, but I'm constantly trying to get like a shot of me pegging something in, a shot of me doing a certain type of knot, and sometimes it's out of like focus and you gotta do it again, and just things like that. Everything just takes literally like, before you know it, an hour's passed, you're just trying to set up a tarp. And it's like, come on.
Yeah. And I mean, I do a lot of fishing solo and I love it. Like just from a mental health perspective, like it's good thinking time, right?
Oh, 100%.
Being out in the...
That's when I have my best thinking time, is just when I'm there by myself, especially if I'm doing like a multi-day trip. Like if I'm doing a 4 or 5 or 6 day trip, you just like get really introspective, and I find that's just, the best you time, like mental health kind of time you can possibly have, And something that I think more people should try. I think like for a lot of people, it's pretty daunting to think to go out in the bush like by yourself. But once you sort of start, like you obviously start small, just doing some like local hikes and things like that, and just gradually build up some confidence. And when you can eventually do sort of multi-day trips, I find it's just really rewarding.
Yeah. And I suppose that there's like a physical challenge to it as well. There's probably a mental challenge with some of the stuff that you've done.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, cool. Hey, I forgot to do something at the start, but I'm going to do it now. So we're going to do the Fast Five, and I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you're going to tell me the first thing that comes into your head. What's your dream car?
Toyota Troop Car, which I've got right over there.
I love that. So that's we're going to pause here. Yeah. So that's a new acquisition for you, right?
6 months ago in June. So 5-6 months ago, got the Troopy, and it's been my dream car for a long time, and finally got it, and could not be more stoked. Yeah, just in the process now of just trying to kit her out, throwing ridiculous amounts of money into it, and
it happens.
That's the issue with Troopies, and like I love them, but they're definitely overpriced, I think, for what they are.
Yeah, and they're like a 70 series, or the whole 70 series is kind of like a blank canvas, right? Yeah. So they're really modifiable, which is good, really customizable.
But at 85 grand, like maybe you bring that down to like 60.
How about some cup holders?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe some comfy seats I don't have to rip out and replace.
So is that a V8 Troopy?
Nah,
or a 4-cylinder? So is that an auto?
Auto,
yeah. Sick.
That was a big thing. I do so much driving, especially in the suburbs for work and stuff. So just having an auto.
Do you like it?
I love it. Love it, yeah.
They're a good thing, hey?
Yeah, I love it, Couldn't be more stoked with it. So, just getting her up to spec now and stuff, getting her out. So,
wicked.
Dream car already.
Well, that's always good. At least you're not looking for something, unattainable. You've got it.
This is my car for as long as it can run.
Yeah, well, and the beautiful thing about a Land Cruiser is that it will last forever.
Yeah, that's the idea.
You'll do 1 million Ks in that thing. What's your favourite place in Australia?
Good question. I've got so many. It's kind of changed a bit, I think, over recent times. If you asked me a few years ago, I probably would have said like around the Murray-Marang, Borley Point, Maroon National Park area of the South Coast.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it down there. But in recent times, I just love getting more sort of out west. And I think probably the northern Blue Mountains area, a place called the Colo River, is probably a big spot for me that I just absolutely love. It's just extremely wild and remote. And the fact that it's only 2 hours from Sydney is just insane to me. It's like a proper wilderness area, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. So we'd probably say, something like that.
Yeah, we've done a bit of camping up around there, and it's stunning.
Yeah, once you get into like the deep gorge of it, like in the upper heads, it's wild. Real wild country. Yeah.
Palmer or Palmy?
Definitely Palmy. Who says Palmer?
I'm just going to keep reinforcing that every episode. And it's also a little bit like, I'm being quite tactical in that I'm speaking to a lot of people from New South Wales and Queensland. What's your favourite band?
Gosh, that's a good question. That's changed so much over the years. I used to be a lot into like sort of like the heavy music, like heavy metal and stuff like that. But like Parkway Drive and things like that. But these days I'm a lot more into my country and things like that. And country and like instrumental kind of like techno stuff as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I listen to heaps of kinds of music, but definitely the country's more sort of my thing these days. And trying to pick my favourite one would be, there's so many good ones. I like Josh Malloy recently. Josh Malloy.
Well, this is the beauty of me being the host, is I can ask people these questions and I don't have to answer them myself because I wouldn't know what to answer for that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah.
What would you eat for your last meal?
Probably like a really good pizza, like a good like a gourmet kind of lamb tzatziki pizza or something like that. I think would probably be
nice.
Yeah.
All right, I'm glad we got that out of the way. I've got to continue to remember to do that because it's meant to happen at the start and then I get carried away and there we go. So, you do a lot of solo stuff, as we said. I'm interested to hear from you a little bit about like some of your experiences that you've had while you've been out filming. Like, have you ever had any like complete disasters while you're out by yourself? Like injuries or like adversity that you've, unexpected sort of stuff happen?
Yeah, there's been a couple. I've sprained my ankle twice, the same ankle, when I've been pretty sort of deep into the bush. And the first time that happened, I was like, I was just stepping off a rock and I had like a big heavy pack with me, 15 kilo pack, and just stepped on my ankle wrong. And I just heard it snap. And I was like, about 7 k's into the bush, off trails, so there's no trails to follow. And to get back out, there's a lot of like rock scrambling and stuff. So I was like, so I just basically found a cave, set up camp in this cave for 2 days, just waited, I took some Nurofen and stuff, just waited for it to like ease down a bit and then just limped on out. But that was kind of like, oh shit, like if I can't get out of here, I gotta try and get some help, I guess, eventually. But that was a bit of a sketchy one. And then I did that same ankle about 6 months later. Once again, I was about 10 k's into that hike, and that's when you start to realize like, oh shit, you're all by yourself out here. You got to try and sort this out yourself, because sure, you can press the red button on an SOS device, but you try and avoid that at all costs if you can. I think probably the sketchiest thing was this time, when I first started the channel. I went for a 5-day hike in a place called the Budawangs, just behind sort of Ulladulla region up in the mountains. It's a beautiful wilderness area, and I was like pretty green, probably sort of pretty new to the kind of the hiking world, but it's a place I wanted to go explore for ages. My dad took me there when I was about 17 and always thought of it, so I thought I'll see how I go with it. And it was going great. The first 4 days was great, but then on like the second last day, I just somehow got a little bit confused of where I was. Like I just lost the track. I wasn't using sort of any like modern GPS track or anything. I was just using map and compass and stuff, and somehow I just got a bit confused about where I was looking, and it just threw me off for that entire day. I was basically just walking around in circles going, where the hell am I? And then in that process, I lost my compass and stuff, and my map nearly blew out of my hands as well because it was super windy. And I was just, by the end of that night, I was like, I'm actually like feeling pretty lost. I need to go back to the cave that I knew how to get back to that I slept in the night before. So I slept in that cave that night, and it was the first time I ever felt like real vulnerable out in the bush, and it's not a nice feeling. Like the feeling of like being lost and in the middle of nowhere, just with no help around, it's not very comforting. But then managed to the next morning to try and retrace my steps and managed to find the trail back out, and it was honestly like the best feeling. Like, I had my missus, I had to meet my missus the next morning because she was picking me up at about 11 o'clock, and I was like, if I don't make it back in time, she's going to like get worried. Does she try and like send help? And then it's just this whole big disaster and stuff. So I did have like a GPS thing. I could have like pressed the SOS, but I wanted to avoid that as much as I could.
Yeah.
And yeah, but there was a point where I was like, do I press this? Because like I'm starting to get like, I don't know, when I'm going to get out of here, and the missus is going to get worried. But
yeah,
no, eventually made it out, and it just, it was a big sort of learning curve of how to just, I guess, control your emotions as well when you're out there, and try not to let it overwhelm you, because I think it can happen really easily.
Well, yeah, and panic is like the worst thing to do, right? Like as soon as you panic, you start making shit
decisions. The best thing to do, as soon as you start to feel like you're lost, just sit down, make yourself a cup of coffee if you can, and just like relax and just start to try and think about level-headed, which I know now, but at the time when I was new, you're just like, what do I do?
Oh, and it's easy to say, like, you know, sitting here and we're, you know, quite comfortable, but just relax, man, don't worry about it. Yeah, and I guess you're right though, like it's the learning curve, right? Like knowing what to do.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the SOS button. So what sort of gear do you take in terms of like, do you take an InReach or like a PLB or something?
Yeah, so I've got a Garmin InReach now. I used to just have like just a PLB. Which one? Yeah, I think it was ACR, I think the brand was.
Yep.
So I used to have one of those, which are great if you don't want to have that satellite communicator kind of function. But it's really handy having like a Garmin InReach or something like that, where you can actually text your missus just to say, yep, I've made it to camp, everything's good, whatnot. And even just like if you're, one of the main reasons I have one of the satellite communicators, because if you're, like say if you get back to your car, if you might be 20 k's down a dirt track or something like that, or more, and then like say if you get a flat battery or whatever, or a huge tree might have fallen over and you can't get your car out or something, at least now I can actually text my missus and say, look, there's an issue here, can you either send someone to sort it out or whatever it is, rather than just being like, oh, now I've got to walk whatever, 50 k's out to the road or something like that. So
yeah, definitely. And I mean, like at GME, we make PLBs, right? So I've obviously got PLBs in all my cars and all that sort of stuff. But recently I bought one of those, I think it's called a Messenger Plus or something from Garmin. So like just the little one that links up to your phone. And it's for the same reason. Like maybe I'm not about to die, but I still want to be able to text my missus to say everything's all good, or like we're delayed, we're going to be home late. So I think it's cool now that we've got all this technology.
Because like even just a normal PLB that's not a satellite communicator, I think they're still got their place, because the battery life on those is like 7 years or something like that. Whereas like a Garmin InReach can run out in a few days.
You got to
if I leave that on, like that's dead within like 3 days kind of thing. So I've always got to turn it off and stuff. And I find just a dedicated PLB still definitely has their place for.
Like you get done by a Brown or something, you don't want to like text someone, you just want to press the button and chill.
And they also use a different satellite frequency, I believe, or a different network or something. So sometimes it's good even to have both, just as like a backup, I feel. Yeah,
and I guess like that's probably the bit I'm keen to understand. Like I do a lot of remote area travel, but I do it in a Land Cruiser, so I can like take stuff. So when you're hiking, obviously you've got the constant trade-off, right? Like between being well equipped and having a 30 kilo pack.
Yes.
Definitely. So how does that work for you? Like what's the sort of process you go through determining what you take on a particular trip?
I've definitely got my gear pretty dialed in these days, and I try to keep the weight down to around about, if I don't take camera gear and stuff like that, my pack sort of sits around 8 or 9 kilos.
Okay.
During summer you can get a little bit lighter. During winter it might be a fraction heavier. But then once you chuck the camera gear and stuff, it weighs, 15 kilos. Plus you chuck the fishing gear in, there's more weight. Chuck the pack raft in, more weight. So it really depends what trip I'm doing in terms of what I'm taking. But just like a standard little overnight hike, I've got it pretty dialed in. So I've just got like my shelter, my sleep gear, first aid gear, pretty simple cooking sort of setup. I generally try and cook on the fire most times if I can. I try and avoid using gas. I just don't like cooking over a little jet boil if I can avoid it.
They're not great for cooking. Like it'll
do the job.
It'll
if you
cook
need
something,
to,
but it's not great.
Yeah, and just like using a titanium pan, like I find the heat distribution on it's not the best. So if you can get over like a coal to an open flame, it's so much better. But I've definitely got my gear pretty dialed in. When I first started, if I think back now, what I used to take, I remember I used to take my first overnight winter camping trip. I actually took like my mum's little throw blanket off her bed. Plus the sleeping bag. I was like, why did I do that? And now I think about it, I was like, why would I take an extra blanket? Anyway, just get a better sleeping bag. And just lots of little things like that were just unnecessary at the time. But I've definitely got pretty dialed in. But it's one of those things that comes with experience. Because like what works for me might not work for someone else. You watch a lot of gear review stuff online, and you get ideas what other people take, but yeah, at the end of the day, just whatever works for you is the go.
And I suppose it's just like trial and error experience.
Yeah. And also just the location as well is a big thing. Like I love to sleep under a tarp, just sort of like cowboy camp under a tarp, just on the ground. But if I'm going somewhere that I know there's like lots of creepy crawlies, and I might bring like a little bivvy to sleep in or something like that, or you might go some areas where I know finding flat level ground is almost impossible, like especially around this area. There's just like a lot of rocks to deal with and stuff, so I might bring a hammock for those trips and things like that. So I'll change things up depending where I go. And
I mean, I know that camping technology has come an insane distance in the last, probably since I got back into it as an adult. So like say the last 10, 15 years, I know just for like full drive touring, like all of the gear has advanced so quickly. And I imagine for like that ultralight hiking stuff.
Heaps, like Dyneema is a huge thing. Like so, which is like, I'm pretty sure it's the same fabric they use for like sailboats, like yachts and stuff for the sail. So it's like really strong, really lightweight, but it's also really expensive. So to get like a Dyneema tent, you'd be looking at $1,000 kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Definitely it cuts out so much weight as well. So once you get a bit more experience, you tend to go down that kind of sort of just trying to find ways to lighten your pack if you can, because when you're hiking 50 kilometers or whatever, every kind of gram does start to count.
So it is really that.
Yeah, but in saying that, like I said, when you bring your camera gear, like you're chucking in a tripod that weighs 1.5 kilos, a camera that weighs 1.5 kilos. It's like when you're trying to save a few grams on a quilt or something like that, it's like, it doesn't really make much sense when you're chucking all that heavy camera gear in.
Yeah, and I guess that's the challenge of, wanting to take good camera gear as well, right?
Yeah.
So, pardon my ignorance, but water, how do you take water with you, or have you got like a purifier, or what's the go?
I usually always take 1 litre to start with, and then in summer I might take 2 litres, but generally it's just 1 litre. And then I've gotten pretty good at being able to find water sources, even in pretty sort of tough areas where you might not sort of find it. I guess you generally start to learn how to read the land and follow little creek lines, and even if you find a creek's pretty dry, sometimes you just got to dig down. You eventually find water will start to seep in, and then just got to filter it. But I always carry a Sawyer squeeze filter, so that it does a pretty good job. I've also got some purification tablets, like worst case scenario I need to use them, but also just learning how to boil water on a fire. I've got a stainless steel water bottle, so I can just chuck down the fire and boil water if I need to. So I generally have like a couple of different methods of being able to sterilise water. But the tricky thing is just trying to find it, because sometimes you do go to a place where you think there's going to be water and there isn't, and you're like, oh shit.
Now what?
I've got to hike another 5Ks in the hopes I find another water source. And there have been a few scenarios where like you definitely get pretty pressed for time, and when you start to feel pretty dehydrated, you also don't make smart decisions as well.
It fully rocks you when you get dehydrated. It's amazing the impact it has on you.
You go downhill pretty quickly, especially if you're like exerting yourself pretty heavily. I remember this trip that me and Matsy, the Silly Swagman guy, we did on the Colo River. We did a pack-craft trip, and we had to get from the top of the cliff line, which is about 500 meters in elevation, down to about, I think it's like 150 meters elevation, but it's like pretty much sheer cliffs. And you're trying to like get down, and we lost the track, and we were like lowering our packs down, and Matsy drops his pack and it falls about 50 meters down a cliff, and I thought he was going to go down with him, but anyway, we ended up like running out of water like halfway down, and it was like in the middle of summer, it's like 35 degrees, we've still got a fair decent like descent, and just like by the time we got to the bottom down of the creek, we were just so thirsty and so dehydrated, and like just that last section, we're just sort of like starting to make stupid mistakes, and that's when like if you roll an ankle or break a leg out there, like you're really up shit creek. Like even just trying to get rescue in there is a pretty serious
absolutely. It's all well and good to press the button, but they've got to be able to get
in there. So that was a pretty sketchy one too.
And what about for food? So like I've watched quite a bit of your content, and like I'm always amazed at what you pull together with like fairly minimal ingredients. But like, do you have any sort of like electrolyte foods or anything that you take? Like, what sort of stuff do you take? Do you have like backup food?
Generally like what you see is kind of what I take. I don't really take much extra food. I try to keep things pretty gourmet, like for what I cook up. I try to generally avoid sort of using like dehydrated meals and things like that, because it is a lot easier to cook those, but I find for content, people do enjoy watching you cook something pretty decent, which is good and bad, because when I'm in the mood for doing it, I love doing it, but at the end of the day, when I'm like absolutely buggered, and it might be in summer, and you got to try and get a fire going or something to cook up this like gourmet food that you just like, I'm happy just to crawl into the tent right now and not cook. But I know a lot of people come to expect, something like decent cooked over the fire these days. So I try and keep things pretty gourmet. It's actually interesting to see what you can actually take in, like not having a fridge as well. Like I just got to chuck everything in the backpack, and I try and freeze like meat and stuff the night before and let it thaw out like on the hike in. But yeah, try and keep things pretty gourmet these days, and it does make for a better camping experience, I think, when you cook something pretty tasty over the fire.
For sure.
You say, like, I made this. Like,
I've eaten a few of those dehydrated meals, like the backcountry meals and stuff, and like, it's food.
It's food, yeah. Especially if you're doing it 5 days in a row, you're like, I can't wait for a burger once I get out of this place.
I think, it's food.
It's
That's
food.
about as far as I'd go with it. But you know, it's really, I find it really interesting, particularly, for you and for other guys that do a lot of survival stuff. I watch heaps of it. And like, I always find it quite inspiring when they manage to pull together like a really good meal in the middle of nowhere.
Because it kind of goes to show you don't actually need, if you're very selective about what you cook, you actually don't generally need that much sort of gear. Like, you just need to basically, you can cook a lot with just like a titanium fry pan, basically. You can generally make a lot of things work. Like, you can even make little ovens out of them. Like, I've made little pizzas with them and stuff, where you get the pan, you just put a few rocks down so that the pizza's off the base, and then just get some foil and kind of make a bit of a pouch around it, and it's this little self-made oven. So things like that. So you
That's
get pretty
cool,
creative. Yeah.
I did have a chuckle watching your episode this week, and you were like umming and ahhing whether that lamb was going to kill you.
Oh mate, that was pretty. Yeah, that was a stupid. that was definitely my fault with that one, because like I said, usually I'll freeze the meat and let it thaw out in the hike in. But on that trip was a pack raft trip, and I've got a new pack raft where you can put gear inside the tubes of the pack raft. And stupid me didn't think that it's a bloody hot day. It was probably 35 degrees that day. And like not realizing or not thinking that inside those tubes is probably going to be easily 50 degrees inside that thing, easily. And so when I got it out, I was like, this smells a bit funny. This is a bit green. I don't know about this, but.
And lamb does go funky quickly, hey?
But like I feel like you can trust your nose pretty well. Like, and it smelled like a bit how you going, but I didn't get sick. So it just goes to show that you can actually push food pretty far. I think a lot more than people think. Like, I bring in cheese all the time, and everyone's like, how do you take cheese into the bush, or even meat in the bush? I'm like, I'm happy to take cheese in for a 3 or 4 day trip and just sit in my pack, and that's fine.
I think we're all a bit precious about that stuff these days, right? Like, people see best before dates and go, I can't eat it. It's like, no, you probably can.
It just goes to, like, it makes you think, like, the supermarket, they throw out so much food because it hits that best before date, when 100% that is fine. That's in the it's in the fridge mostly, and it's just a formality, unfortunately. And so much food must go to waste because of it.
Absolutely, man. I've just finished reading a book called The Savage Frontier about Cape York. It's like in the 1800s, and like they're doing cattle drives up through the Cape for like weeks and months. They had food. They didn't have refrigeration. And it's like, they were salting meat, and they were smoking meat and all that sort of stuff. But like, we're so precious now with like everything must be refrigerated at all times. It's like you can push food pretty hard.
100%,
I think lamb's a funny one. I've had a few instances where I've like, even in the fridge in the car, and I've had it in there for like a couple of weeks on a touring trip, and it does start to go green and it's a bit funky. But you're absolutely right. Like, if meat is off, you know it's off. It's not like, if you're like umming and ahhing about it, you're okay.
It's fine.
Like, off meat is off meat.
That's why you've got a nose. It's like literally had millions of years to evolve to tell you when something is not not working.
Do not eat that, it will kill you. That's pretty cool. It's I think it's so funny because I was talking about this with Harry from Fire to Fork, right? And obviously he makes a living from cooking videos, but everybody has to eat. But then when you're doing, these remote solo hikes and you're counting grams and you don't want to carry weight, you could easily just eat food that's food, right? But then
just packaged food,
putting that little bit of extra effort in, I think, is part of the appeal.
100%. Well, it's a big part of the camping experience, I think, as well. Like, especially during winter when the sun sets at like 5 o'clock. I'm like, I've got literally like, I don't go to bed till 11 o'clock most nights. So I'm like, I've got 5 hours of me just sitting around a campfire. I may as well cook something pretty decent.
Do you think there's something like, I don't know, do you think it taps into something like
primal.
Primal
for sure.
within
Cooking
you?
around a fire for sure. Especially whenever I do like little survival missions or anything like that, where I'm like trying to catch my own food, and you just chucking that a fish literally just straight on coals, or put a stick through it and put it over the fire. It definitely taps into something that we're missing, I think, for sure.
Yeah, that like hunter-gatherer thing. It's quite it's quite rewarding. Huh?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you do a lot of fishing on your trips?
I've started to. So it's funny, like growing up, my dad wasn't much of a fisherman. Like he fishes a little bit, but it's not a thing that we do as a family. And yeah, starting the channel, had zero interest in fishing.
Yeah, right.
Didn't really care for it at all. But then the more, like, everywhere I go, I'm pretty much always by a river or some sort of water source. And then, just a commenter one time just sent me a message saying, "Hey mate, I really reckon you should try and get into fishing." And I was like, "Oh, all right, I'll give it a go." So he told me what to buy, went out and bought it. And then since then, it's become a thing that I've actually really enjoyed about getting out into places, because it takes me to places that I probably otherwise wouldn't maybe go to if I'm just going just for a hike or something like that. It gives me a reason to go explore different parts of New South Wales or whatever, or the country, because now like I want to go and chase like a particular fish, like Murray cod or something like that. So I might go up north, like to the Tablelands to go cod fishing, or down the Snowies to go trout fishing and stuff like that. So it has actually forced me to get out and explore different areas, which I've absolutely loved. And then it's also just a good activity to do. It's interesting content, but most people, some people still don't, because like my viewership's a pretty broad viewership. Like there's people who watch it for the hiking, for the fishing, for the whatever, rafting and things like that. So I know not everything I do appeals to everyone, but I find a lot of people do enjoy watching some of the fishing aspects. So, and like I said, I've enjoyed learning about it and getting into it. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so you're doing predominantly freshwater fishing?
Yeah. I can't live on the coast. I literally live 200 meters from the beach, and I could do as much saltwater fishing as I possibly wanted to, but I hardly ever touch it. Like I just, unless I go do like maybe a canoe camp on like a coastal lake, I'll do a bit of like brim fishing or flathead fishing and stuff. But yeah, like I live right near the cliffs in southern Sydney, and I could go fishing off the cliffs as much as I wanted to and just never bother. Whereas like I love getting out into the fresh waters and go chasing bass or trout or cod or something like that. I think just getting away from the crowds, I find, particularly where I live, like around sort of the southern Sydney area, there's just always boats out and stuff, and it doesn't really appeal to me. I want to get away where I don't see a single soul, and even if I don't catch anything, it's just about being out there and so.
Yeah, well, that's how I justify my lack of ability with fishing as well, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if I catch anything or not. It's just about being out here.
I'm definitely not the best fisherman as well. There's been a pretty steep learning curve, and especially when you're trying to learn something new, like online, like
on camera.
On camera, it's like you guys can see, like you're watching me. Like I'm not. It's not like I'm going home and practicing like at home. Really, like every time you see me fish, that's pretty much the only time I'm fishing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're learning with me essentially.
I can fully relate to that. I'm learning how to make a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm filming it and saying dumb things and making mistakes. And
which I think people really like though. I think people like to see the realness of it, and the fact that you're like, I guess, vulnerable or whatever, like that you're learning something. And I don't claim to be an expert in absolutely anything. Like I'm not an expert in anything. So I like to, and it's also really like interesting having, like, I guess I got an untapped resource of thousands of people who watch my channel, and they can give me feedback on how to like I used to cast. This is one thing that I learned. I used to cast with my right hand and then swap over to my left hand and start reeling with my right hand. Everyone said, no, cast with your right hand and reel with your left hand. That's how you meant to do it.
So did you switch your reels over?
Yeah, so I've switched it over. So now I cast with my right and I'll reel with my left hand.
How long does it take for that to not feel completely gumby?
It definitely took a bit, but now it's so natural.
It is, eh? Yeah. So I did the same, man. I've fished my whole life, and when I really got into soft plastic fishing and lure fishing, I can't remember who it was, but it would have been like probably free-to-air TV. Someone was saying the same thing about if you're right-handed, it makes sense to have the rod in your right hand and switch the reel handle over. Yeah. And I switched all of my reels over to a left hand. Yeah. And like the first couple of months, I just felt like the biggest Gumby. Yeah. But now it's so natural that when I pick up someone else's fishing rod, I'm like,
it's like, this is backwards.
Why is it on the wrong side? But it's so natural, right? Being able to cast and then just click the bail arm over. Yeah. So that's so fascinating. So, I mean, and that's great, right? You're learning on camera, but then your audience is helping you. They're not criticizing you and going, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing.
Some people definitely criticize, but...
The internet is full of all sorts of different people. Yeah. But, you know, I think you're absolutely right. Like, being vulnerable, being really quite... Like, open with, hey, I'm not an expert.
Like it took me literally like months before I could catch like a fish. Like it took me so long. And I remember I get people like just saying like, look at this bloke, hurry up and catch a fish already. I'm like, I'm trying my best, mate.
Yeah. And nobody is born an expert in anything, and that's what I think people need to remember on the internet.
And also like trying to film as well at the same time, like you're fishing, especially, so I've got into fly fishing in the last couple of years, and I absolutely love fly fishing. Like down the snowy mountains, fly fishing is just, it's made for it, it's beautiful. But like when you're learning, especially some of the streams down the snowies, like there's just, like the banks are really not overgrown, but they're just, the plants that grow on the banks are just real spiky, like shrubby kind of plants. And it is so easy to get that fly tangled up in those shrubs. And especially when you're trying to set up your camera over there, you've got your GoPro attached to you, you're trying to get all the shots, and you're just ending up in the bush every time, and you're just like, swearing at yourself, like, why am I doing this? But now I've gone better. It's like just persistence pays off, and now I love it.
I have loved fishing my whole life, and I have never picked up a fly rod, and I don't know if I ever will, because I've watched so many people struggle with it, and I go, I'm sure it's very rewarding, but like I find fishing challenging enough without the need for that.
There's definitely an art to it.
So from the filming perspective, like, did you have a content creation background before you got into YouTube? Like, did you film stuff before, or you just got a camera and figured it out?
So I'm a photographer by trade, so I've been doing like real estate and property photography for the last 14 years, something like that, so quite a while. So I've been taking photos for 20 plus years. I used to take photos of like surfing and stuff growing up with that. I used to love shooting surfing, and then I didn't really touch the filming aspect. So like once I got into, so I obviously had a camera and all the gear, but never turned on the filming part of the camera. So, so when I started getting into started filming the hike, I had to learn everything. I had to learn how to cut footage together and put songs to the footage, and just learning about frame rates and all those kinds of things. There's a lot to learn when you get into and like neutral density filters and all those things to get the certain frame rate right, and there's so much to learn when you're starting out. But I think it definitely helped, like they had a work in photography, and so I know how a camera works. It's just about applying that to filming. The big thing was just getting your head around like frame rates and stuff like that, just to making sure that you got nice cinematic footage if you want to use higher frame rates, and things like that. So
yeah, there's a lot to it, hey, and I guess you can tell with your footage that you're not shooting everything on a GoPro. Yeah. Like I know you mentioned that you do use a GoPro.
I do. I really do wish I just shot it on the GoPro. It would make life so much easier. I'm actually jealous when I watch other guys, like especially a lot of the like back to basics guys and stuff like that, where they just use GoPros. Like that looks so much easier compared to having no mind just carrying a tripod and like a SLR camera with the lens and stuff, compared to a tiny little GoPro that weighs nothing. You just chuck it wherever you want. But unfortunately, like the creative side of me wants like the footage to look cinematic.
Yes.
And I don't know, like a lot of people enjoy that about my films, that it is kind of like shot pretty, but yeah, it's a lot of work trying to set up the tripod constantly. By the end of the trip, like you just want to throw that tripod in the bin. Like, the amount of times I have to adjust those bloody legs of the tripod. Whereas you have a GoPro, you can literally just put that wherever and you get interesting shots with it. But I just wish, I'm sure one day the GoPro footage will like maybe rival. It's probably never going to rival an SLR because it hasn't got the lens. Right? Yeah, sensor size and a lens. But it is getting better. But yeah, still, there's definitely time and place for GoPros. Like whenever I do my pack rafting or my fishing, definitely chuck the GoPro on. That's the only way to do it.
I mean, it's hard for me to sort of comment on that because I've worked in video for a long time, right? So I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm a snob, but like I appreciate good footage and I appreciate good camera gear. And I remember the original GoPro, like the first one ever, and I look back at the footage that
must be shocking.
It was so so bad, but like it opened up a whole new world in terms of content creation. Even now, like I watch heaps of outdoor YouTube content, and like you can tell the difference between the pure GoPro stuff and those like yourself that shoot with a good camera. And I understand it's punishing, but like
it does look better.
It just looks better, right?
Yeah. If you're doing a lot more action stuff, then I can see why you would just use a GoPro, because it's just so much quicker. But if you've got time to set up a good camera, you do get such like beautiful shots. Like set up besides like a tree or something, a plant, you know, like have nice depth of field, and then you walk past, it just looks so much nicer than just a GoPro footage. So it is worth it in the end.
Yeah, the bokeh and all that, as opposed to everything is in focus all the time. It's I mean, it's fascinating though for me, as we were talking about before we started filming, like just how far that technology's come.
Yeah.
Like what you can buy now for a couple of grand,
Yeah, it's
which
pretty insane.
used to be a $20,000 cinema camera.
Yeah, I can chuck a drone up because $1,500 drone. We get pretty cheap drones now, but just being able to get that perspective didn't even exist 10 years ago, really. So
Yeah.
it's so good being able to, just get all like it's just endless the possibilities of how to, change up the angles and make your videos a bit more interesting. It's gone pretty far.
That's cool. So your audience, is it mostly Australian? Is it sort of, have you got people from other countries watching you?
Yeah, it's probably maybe like 50% Aussies, and then maybe like 20% American, and then mixed everywhere else. Like,
yeah, right. It's only 50% Australian.
Yeah, about 50 or something. Yeah, I think it's about 50. Last time I checked. And then it's mixed up with everywhere else. A lot of UK and stuff like that, Canada. But Americas are definitely the market you want to tap into if you want to like grow the channel.
Yeah. Well, there's just so many of them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Got 330 million compared to us. So, but I feel like there is probably a point as well, maybe with Aussies, that like you kind of, I feel like I'm kind of maybe at that stage as well, like in the creation that, so the content that I create, like that kind of hiking sort of base, I do wonder sometimes if I kind of reach like the majority of those kind of audience that watch YouTube, because I kind of, my channel is still growing, but it kind of has sort of slowed a little bit sort of now compared to, I guess, during like COVID and stuff, a lot more people were jumping on, but
everyone was locked in their house,
exactly.
right? And I suppose there's like an element of that escapism during that, like, hey, you can't go anywhere, but you can watch this guy doing it.
Yeah.
So you had your channel during COVID?
Yeah, so I started it in 2018, I think. And like it was pretty, like it did pretty well from the get-go, because like I said, there wasn't many people sort of doing it. So I did kind of find a pretty good niche to start with. But then during COVID, like it definitely, skyrocketed.
So were you still getting out and filming?
Yeah, well, to start with, I wasn't, because I thought I wasn't allowed to. And then I realized, wait, this is actually work. I actually get paid for it. I could get money from it. So there's a nice little loophole there where I actually can go out and film. So I could even, like towards the halfway through it, I realized that. So then I started doing little trips to like Blue Mountains and stuff. And you get pulled over and you say, this is for work, and they'd let you go, which is pretty good. So pretty fortunate. Like I definitely didn't take it for granted, because a lot of people were itching to get out there. But also it was pretty nice having no one else on the trails or in the car park.
Yeah, like how good, hey?
Yeah, can't complain about it. Yeah.
That
seems like a lifetime ago now.
It is weird when you think back on that, hey? Like, it's like, did that actually happen?
Yeah.
It was all very surreal.
Yeah, it does, eh? Seems nice.
So, something I'm interested in, you go all over New South Wales, and you've done some international stuff as well?
Yeah, so I went to New Zealand at the start of this year. It's probably I've done heaps of overseas travel, but in terms of filming videos, I probably have just done the New Zealand one at the start of the year. Went to the Kimberley in May as well this year. Went to Tassie last year. So I've started to, because like I think New South Wales is honestly probably one of the best states to live in Australia. If you do what I do, it's just got so much variety of landscapes.
Yeah.
You got the desert, the beach, mountains, and even our mountain ranges, we've got like nice sandstone mountains, you've got granite mountains. This has got such a variety of landscapes, but I've enjoyed starting to sort of spread my wings a bit and go a bit further afield. Like that New Zealand trip I did at the start of the year, I did a 6-day packraft trip over there, and it was just the best trip I've ever done. Absolutely loved it. I think back on it, just such a big smile on my face. It was just amazing. It's beautiful. So I'm enjoying doing that. I'd like to try and do more of that. Obviously it's a bit tricky now, having a 5-month-old.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about, I'm going to see if I can try and get back over to New Zealand at the start of next year, but we'll see how we go with the family and whatnot.
Such a beautiful country, isn't it?
It's gorgeous, yeah. And there's no big animals that want to eat you.
No snakes.
Yeah, no snakes. Honestly, like where I was, it looked like Alaska. It was absolutely stunning. And I was like, it's actually nice not having to worry like a bear is going to eat me or a wolf or something like that. Whereas if I actually went to Alaska, because I want to go to Alaska and do a packraft trip there.
Yeah.
But part of me is kind of sketched out about the bears and stuff.
It's like hectic.
Yeah, it's hectic.
I watch heaps of Outdoor Boys, right?
Yeah,
and then he's like, I got my bear spray because, there's grizzlies here. And then he's like showing like these massive bloody paw prints. And you're like, man.
Nuts.
And Americans think that we're crazy because we've got snakes.
I'd much rather a snake and a spider than a bloody grizzly bear trying to eat me. Nah.
Or mountain lions or wolves or whatever else. Yeah.
So I'm definitely keen to try and get to Canada or Alaska or something like that and do some trips over there. But just got to get over that fear of being eaten potentially.
I mean, it's a pretty realistic fear.
But no, it was nice in New Zealand, like not having the snakes as well, because like there's a section where I did a lot of bush bashing, and in Australia, you'd just be constantly thinking about snakes.
Yeah.
Like whenever everyone always asks me like about snakes in Australia, and it is one thing that's always on my mind. Like you just learn to live with it, and you just kind of know where they might be sort of hiding and stuff. It's just part of it. But over there, you just don't have to worry about anything.
Do they have any snakes over there?
I think they've got like maybe one snake, I believe, maybe on the North Island. I think I was researching, but I don't even know if it's venomous.
Yeah, I don't think they've got any venomous ones.
Nah, yeah.
I wasn't sure if they've got like a legless lizard or something, and it's not even a real snake.
Like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wild.
So that's pretty good.
So in New South Wales, how does it work with the land that you're accessing? So is it? It's a mixture of national parks, state forests,
Crown
state
land.
Conservation area, Crown land.
Yeah, Crown. Especially when I do it on packcraft trips, a lot of that's on Crown land. Like a lot of people don't realise that a lot of waterways are considered Crown land, and quite often, like say 10 or 20 metres of the bank of the waterway, especially to like the potential flood height, I think it's called, then that's considered Crown land. So, which is actually a nice little loophole if you're like, because you can't take dogs in most places in New South Wales or Australia, but Crown land you can technically take a dog on Crown land, and there's also a bit of a, from what I understand, a bit of a loophole in terms of camping on Crown land as well. So if you like a lot of like say like the western rivers, like on the western side of the Blue Mountains, a lot of that, if you can get access to the river somehow, quite often there's like a causeway or something across it. You can then usually, there might be private properties, for example, bordering it like on these mountains, but quite often you can, I'm pretty sure, legally camp on that Crown land. And you could essentially technically take a dog as well. It's a bit of a, I've called up Crown Lands to clarify this, and I actually emailed him and he said, can I give you a call? And I was like, sure.
Oh yeah, doesn't want to put it in
writing. And he said, well, like technically, and I was like, okay. So
no, I've definitely heard that before, that like you can't own a waterway, right?
Yeah, and it even comes down to like fishing rights. So I'm pretty sure even if a private property has like a creek on that property, you can technically, if you have a fishing rod, you can technically use that creek as a way to cross the property. I'm pretty sure from what I've read. So a few little loopholes around that. But yeah, no, generally most of my stuff is done in national parks. A little bit of state forests here and there, especially if I want to do sort of more survival kind of trips. I'll go to a state forest, a bit more, the rules are a bit more relaxed there. And same with Crown land, the rules are pretty relaxed in the Crown land. National park, there's a lot of rules. But generally, in saying that though, New South Wales, compared to the rest of Australia, New South Wales national parks actually are fairly lenient in what you can do in terms of like wild camping. You actually can camp like sort of off track in quite a lot of our national parks, which I don't think a lot of people realise.
No, I didn't realise. That's where I was going with it, like what the legalities are in terms of free camping in a national park.
It's tricky with full driving because you're not, so when it comes to full driving, you're technically not allowed to, in quite a lot of places, camp within 200 metres of a road. So if you like drive and then you hike in 200 metres in the bush, you can camp wherever you want pretty much. But you generally can't camp within 200 metres of a road or a lookout of an established campground, toilet blocks and things like that. So if you hike in 200 metres, you can usually camp wherever you want. So, because obviously the last few years, access to national parks definitely is, like even as someone who's not a four-wheel driver, like I obviously have a four-wheel drive, I use a four-wheel drive to get to places, but I don't actively like go four-wheel driving. I just use it as a vehicle to get me to remote areas. Even I've noticed places being locked up and stuff when they don't really necessarily need to be. So I have seen some tracks that have just been absolutely trashed, and I can understand, I guess, their reasoning why they do it. Unfortunately, I don't really agree with it. I wish people took better responsibility for themselves, but unfortunately there's just idiots out there who do the wrong thing and the rest of us have to pay for it, unfortunately. And
I mean, you know, it's something that we talk about on this channel a lot, but it's, don't get me wrong, I don't think we should just be allowed access to everywhere. Like there are places that are environmentally sensitive or, you know, whatever. It just seems like a bit of a cop-out to go, oh, well, that track's, you know, been damaged because of four-wheel drives. We'll just put a gate on it and then forget about it.
There's no sort of consultation. There's no ways how can we work on to fix this or anything.
Well, there's just no management, right? Like putting a gate on something and then just ignoring it. That's not management.
Obviously, it's just, there's a lot of national, like New South Wales has a huge amount of national park land and it's growing every year. And unfortunately, there's just either not enough funding, not enough personnel, combination of the two. Willpower, I don't know what I
think it's the first two, absolutely. I've got a mate that subcontracts to national parks and does pest control and weed spraying and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, we were talking about it just on the weekend. He was saying that the the guy who's coordinating the work up his way wants to do more of it, but he said, "Oh, I've got to put forward a business case, and I've got to like submit all these requirements and a job order, and it won't get approved because we just don't have the funding."
Yeah. Okay.
So there's people within parks that want to do more, but they just don't have the money, and they don't have the resources, and the bureaucracy is overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Is just the red tape with so much stuff. It makes things too hard to do things. But yeah, in terms of like wild camping, what I do. Like we're actually pretty lucky in this state. We can, because I know in Queensland, wild camping is pretty much not a thing. Like people do it, but I don't think it's legal. I think Victoria, you can do it. I'm pretty sure in most places. Tasmania, you can in some places, but Tasmania is pretty strict.
Super strict.
Yeah, but in terms of New South Wales, we can, hike off track, camp out of bounds, like camp off track. We can have fires as well in a lot of national parks. A lot of people don't seem to realise. Even when it comes to like firewood collection, that's a very grey area. It's not a grey area because you actually go into the firewood policy, New South Wales firewood policy, and it even says on that you're allowed to collect firewood in New South Wales national parks. You just can't take that firewood off park.
Yeah.
So you can, if you collect it, it has to be used for a campfire on park. And so I think I've noticed a lot of signs popping up like around the Blue Mountains and stuff where I know you're allowed to, in the plan of management, it says you can collect firewood, but on a sign it might say like no firewood collection. And I think it's a bit of a weird sort of grey area there. I think they're kind of referring to you can't collect firewood and take it home to use in your domestic purposes. But I think a lot of people read that and go, oh, there's no firewood collection. You can't even collect it to have a little campfire. So,
well, technically, a state forest is the same, to my understanding. So in New South Wales, you can collect firewood in a state forest if it's fallen timber.
Yeah.
But if you want to take it home to burn it, you need a permit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
but I guess in national parks there is no permit to take it home.
Yes.
Actually, I think I have read down the Riverina area, down the Murray, there is maybe one national park where you can do that. But yeah, generally speaking, you got to use it on park. So there are like a lot of little rules like that. I just think a lot of people aren't aware of them, like having fires and I guess they probably don't want to promote it because unless you are really sort of in that kind of world and you know how to do it respectfully and responsibly, it's probably not good to tell every blow about it because a lot of people won't know how to do it. Probably like, oh yeah, I can have a fire wherever I want, sure. And I'll just go chop a tree down and not clean up after themselves and all the rest of it. And that's a big thing. Like I try pretty hard on my channel to promote like responsible sort of wild camping. Like I always get rid of I always make sure the fire's well and truly out before I leave camp. I even like to the point where once it's like pour water or mix sand through it, I make sure that I can actually touch it and hold it. And then quite often I'll just disperse it through the bush, like through the grass or wherever it is.
Like no trace.
Yeah, well that's it. The whole point is to leave no trace. And so the next person comes by, you wouldn't even know I was there. And I think that's a great thing to try and promote. And if more people do that, then I think the less national parks have a reason to try and clamp down on their restrictions.
Yeah, and like this is the challenge, right? So some of the stuff that I've been doing lately wasn't planned, but I've been getting involved in a little bit more of the political side of public land access. And one of the comments that was made to me recently by someone from the Four-Wheel Drive Association was, it's really difficult when you go for a meeting with parks and try and say that four-wheel drivers are responsible, and then they bring up footage from social media of people doing dumb shit in a four-wheel driver in national parks. You can't argue with that, right?
No,
and this is the challenge, is that there are people who are irresponsible and don't do the right thing, and then it makes it so much more difficult for the rest of us. Like, how do you argue? Like, no, we're all good.
That's the thing. And like, it literally probably is a small minority, but unfortunately people chuck this stuff online and they love to, I guess, show off on TikTok and all, like, especially when it comes to like muddy areas, and they just want to get the shot for the gram and just like find mud everywhere. And that is literally the one thing that national parks are going to go, all right, we're going to close that track now.
Yeah, it just makes it easy, right?
Yeah. And it's a big thing, I think, is for content creators to set it a good example, just to show how to drive a track properly, I guess, and just camp properly. And
yeah, and I think that's the thing now, is everything is visible, right?
Yeah.
As soon as it's on the internet, it's visible, it's there forever. Yeah. Like, and you've got to think about, not everyone shares the same passion for, for four-wheel driving. And even you've got a four-wheel drive, but you don't do the same stuff I do. And so, I think we've all got to be conscious of what we put out there. And
for sure.
and I guess the long-term impact.
Yeah.
So where do you see it going in terms of access? I mean, as you said, the National Parks estate in New South Wales is growing every year, right?
Yeah.
Like they're getting more and more Crown land, state forests converted into national park.
Yeah, private property is being converted over. Yeah, it's hard to know because I have read that in the coming years, I think it's like 15 or 20 years time, that a lot of national park lands will be handed back to Aboriginal land or for them to control. So it'll be interesting to see what happens then. It seems like as time goes on, just even places that I camp down the coast, like there's a place called Maroon National Park. I've been camping there for about 15 or almost 20 years. And I've seen that go from state forest, the national park where you could camp wherever you want, to now established campgrounds, to now you have to book it. And it's just a gradual progression of like, I guess, there's so many more people getting out there these days, or I guess that's just progress in their eyes, that like for them to, I guess, prove that, prove they've got a job to do, they just constantly do these upgrades and feel like they have to establish these campgrounds. And it is a shame, because I don't really know where it's going to go in the future. It's
hard, and I'm sure you feel the same way as I do, having a young kid, that you wonder what, by the time they get to our age, what are they going to have available?
Yeah, do they have to camp in an established campground every time? Is that it? And to me, that's...
The National Parks booking system that came off the back of COVID, I hate that, man.
Yeah.
Like, I was looking just last night, actually, at Point Plummer, so up near Crescent Head, and it's a beautiful spot, and like National Parks have got a campground right on the coast there. Like, it's a cracking spot. And they said it's currently closed.
Yeah.
And it's closed for upgrades.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean upgrades?
Yeah.
It's like a patch of grass next to the beach. Like, just leave it alone.
Leave it, yeah.
It's closed at the moment. It's opening this week, 15th of December.
Yeah.
And it's because they've designated campsites to make the booking process better for people. And I'm like,
it's like
that's crap.
Yeah, not everyone wants like I don't want to go into the bush and literally camp in like a square box.
No.
And with like a designated fire ring and all the rest of it.
It takes the fun and the freedom out of it.
I don't even want a toilet block. Like,
yeah,
I don't have to just go in the bush. Like, I just want things to be like, I just love simple camping. And like I said, for some reason they just tend to throw a lot of money into building that kind of infrastructure. And maybe I guess that they're trying to appeal to the wider population. They're like sort of like once a year campers, maybe, if that, who are, that's nice.
But like go to a big four if you're one of them,
exactly.
right?
For people like us, I feel like that kind of, I guess, freedom, or just having those sort of off the grid places where you can just pull up next to a river and there's nothing around and you just camp there. I feel like, unfortunately, that might start to be restricted. And like, what are we meant to do? Like, this is our passion. Like, it's not like we do this once a year. I do this every fortnight. Like, constantly. It's like, this is what I love to do. I don't want these like freedoms essentially sort of taken away. And I know as the population grows, they have to, I guess, do something, but that's a whole different topic in itself.
No, but I'm with you on that, man. And it's like, you know, I know for me and my wife, we will actively seek campsites and places to go that don't have facilities.
Yeah.
Because we know that cuts out
like
80% of people because they need to have toilets or they need to have running water or whatever. So that off-grid free camping, it cuts down the number of people that you have to deal with. And, you know, I'm a bit like you. I like the escapism part of it. I like being that isolation is such a big part of why you want to go out there.
Yeah. So I think they need to cater for both, like all different kinds of people. Yeah, I think that's it.
And I think at the end of the day, like, it's public land.
Yeah.
And at the moment, it feels like decisions are being made in offices.
Yeah, with people who never actually step foot in the bush.
Spot on. And that's the thing, really, right? It's like, where's the input from the active participants? Like, they talk about stakeholder engagement and consultation, but like, it just feels like lip service, right?
100%. There is too much bureaucracy around it. Like the ministers and stuff. The ministers for environment. I guarantee that person probably never has ever gone camping, probably, and yet the
doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like it. The way they talk, you know, like they might go out and get a photo taken for a press release and then jump back into a government-funded car and piss off back into the city. And it's really frustrating for people like us that have spent so much time outside.
Yeah. And I think the tricky thing is, because obviously national parks it's designed for conservation, but it also is the original sort of founding sort of people who started the national park movement it also was for recreation. There's a bloke called Miles Dunphy. He's actually a bloke from Oatley. Back in like the early 1900s, 1920s, he was pretty instrumental in sort of fighting for conservation and the creation of the Blue Mountains National Park. But a big part of it was for recreation. They really wanted to like keep natural spaces for humans to go out and enjoy. There's even like photos of him like with his swag and his dog and his like rifle like going in the Blue Mountains and stuff. And it's like, this is literally like one of the renowned grandfathers of conservation in Australia. And he even said that he wanted recreation to be a big part of it. And I feel like the movement during the 70s and 80s, like the conservation sort of movement, and like I'm a fairly big sort of like greenie, like I love the bush and stuff, and I don't want it to disappear, but I also am realistic about it in that I want people to be able to use the bush as well, because at the end of the day we need to love the bush to be able to protect it, essentially. And so I think like during the 70s and 80s you had a different conservation movement come in and say, all right, we're going to create the Wilderness Act and we're not going to allow anyone to be able to sort of manage that land or sort of recreate in that kind of land. And I don't know, I feel like we need to sort of reassess
what its purpose is, right? What is it there for? And I'm the same, man. Like anyone who enjoys the outdoors, and that could be hiking, fishing, camping, four driving, whatever it is, if you're not a conservationist and you're interested in any of those pursuits, you're an idiot. Yeah. Because if we don't conserve it, then it won't be there, right? It's that simple. So, and I think that's such a challenge, is that there's this perception, probably from people that don't do it, that, you know, that we're impacting the native flora and fauna by being in there, or, you know, like the one that always gets me, like, can't fly a drone in a national park because you might upset the animals or whatever. But like,
you can fly a plane overhead.
Planes and helicopters, no worries. And then, you know, in national parks, they'll do helicopter culls where the government is funding a helicopter to go and shoot
animals. It's like,
I reckon a drone is possibly a lower impact on the local.
Some bloke hanging out with a rifle shooting a helicopter.
So I think you're right. I think there just needs to be some like middle ground and maybe some sort of reset, because I know that, you know, as we touched on earlier, like there's a mental health aspect to it. Like the more people that get out and spend time in the wilderness, the better it'll be for all of us, I reckon.
Yeah. Like I said, I just think unfortunately a lot of people who are making these decisions just aren't people who spend that much time like either in the outdoors or even in the outdoor scene and understand what people want. Like they just think they're probably doing the right thing, or
and to be fair, the economic benefit.
Oh, that's a huge one too.
Like it's massive, right? Like you think about the camping and hiking industries, even hunting. Like
I was going to say, I got into hunting this year and I probably dropped, like 10, 12 grand on hunting gear and like doing a course and all the rest of it. I'm like, that has literally just gone straight back into the economy. So yeah,
it's a bit short-sighted to be like, oh no, you're bad for the environment, but I think there's economic impacts and there's other considerations in terms of mental health and you know, just general well-being of people. I know I'd much rather be sitting out here than in an office or
100%
cooped up inside. Well, Scotty, mate, it's been awesome to hear a little bit about your story. Really, thank you for your time.
Thanks for sit down and have a chat with you. It's been awesome,
cheers, man.
Yeah, cheers.
And we'll see all of you next time on The Outer Side.